Coming to you live from Surprise in Arizona. Hope you're all having a super fantastic sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 2051. Getting up there in numbers. Genealogy Roadblocks. We need eyes tested. Genealogy Roadblocks. How to overcome missing or destroyed records. Yes, we're going to be looking for those missing and destroyed records this evening. So... roadblocks, blokes, oh jeepers. Have you ever hit a dead end in your genealogy research because records were lost, destroyed, or never created? What strategies have helped you to uncover missing pieces of your family history? So imagine spending years researching an ancestor only to find out that the records you need were destroyed in a fire. That's exactly what happened with the 1890 US Census, which was almost entirely lost due to a fire and improper storage. But don't worry, missing records don't mean your search is over. This is a very common thing to have lost records due to fires, wars, natural disasters, even human error. But alternative records can often fill in the gaps. There's different ways, different things that we can do. So that's what we're going to look at tonight. And here's some fun facts for you. In some areas, people didn't officially record births until the early 1900s. Before that, family Bibles were often used only to record, were often the only record of a birth, or some churches and parishes were recording stuff well before the government's all turned around and says, we need that information. So let's get started. Oh my gosh, I love this because when there's missing records, it creates a big mystery. And I love solving mysteries and I love researching this stuff. And so this is a hot topic for me because it means we have to stretch the imagination. We have to think outside the box. What other angles can we find the information that is not available to us through the primary source, being a birth certificate, a marriage certificate, a death certificate, a will, what other information, probate records, all of that. What other information can we use to help find the missing information? So you ready? I know I am. Let's go. So strategies for researching when birth, marriage, or census records are missing. Determine what was lost and when. Research what records existed during your ancestor's lifetime and whether they were destroyed. For example, if your ancestor lived in Chicago in 1871, the Great Chicago Fire likely destroyed local records. Check state and county archives. Sometimes partial copies or alternative versions survived. There may have also been, there may even have been some misfiling of records, and they were put in different places as well. And they could be in your state or county archives. Use substitute records for births, marriages, and deaths. Church records. Many churches kept baptism, marriages, and burials before governments did. They kept them as a record of everything that happened within the church. So they may have had a separate book for baptisms, and in some baptism records, you will find that they have handwritten in the actual date of birth, which is kind of nice when you think about it and you go back and have a look at that. Actually, I'm just going to go in here real fast. I'm going to actually show you a baptism record that has that information in there. Oh, jeepers, totally forgot his name. I'm going to actually show you one. I'm going to show you a birth record that has a... is it in here? I just feel like actually showing you something instead of just talking about it. I feel like I need to show you this one. Where is it? I think it's this one. Yes, this is the one. Okay, I need to zoom in on this. Okay, first of all, we're going to start up here. All right. I think this is the one I needed. Yes, it is. Okay. So we're going to do a little show and tell on this one. So I'm actually going to show you a baptismal record And this is from my third great-grandfather, I think. No, second great-grandfather. Hang on. I'm still, where are we? Where is it? Yeah, second great-grandfather. I keep calling him my third great-grandfather. It's the third great-grandfather we're looking for. So, ay. Some things get muddled. But when you've got guys who have the same name. Okay. So, what was I talking about? Oh, yeah. So some churches recorded things beforehand. So let's have a look at an actual parish record. And I'm going to do the share screen thingamabob. Share screen. And I want this one here. Yep, that's the one. Okay, make sure it's on screen. Yes, it is. Okay, so this is, I'm going to get back to the right screen here. So this is the London, England, Church of England births and baptisms from 1830 to 1924, and I'm looking for William Henry Morris Price. This is my second great-grandfather. We had lost him for a long time. This is from Hackney in the St. James Shoreditch Curtin Road Church Parish. It says, baptism solemnized in this parish, St. James Curtin Road, in the county of Middlesex in the year of 1855. Now, if we come down here, here is Price, and I'm going to blow it up so you guys can see it. Doopy-doopy-doopy-doo. Just making sure it's showing on the screen correctly. Yes, it is. Excellent. So this is, this here says November the 18th, 1855, because we saw that at the top. And it says William Henry Morris, born 18th of November, 1849. So this is on his 6th birthday that he is being baptized. And it says the parents are William Henry and Elizabeth. The last name is Price. The address says 1 Bartlett, oh, jeepers, I've forgotten what that says. Bartlett's Building, Earl Street, Firstbury. And then it says father's abode was in Wanstead, Essex. And it says was, which means to me when it says was, he could have passed. So this is the first clue that we have seen about William's father who may have passed. And then it says that the father's occupation was a jeweler. And then this is the officiating ministry, C.B. Broadley, officiating minister. So remember, I always talking about, for those that have been following, whenever you look at a record, always look at what's above and what's below. So when you look at what's below on November the 18th, there is another entry here for a James Robert who was born the 28th of November, 1854. So this is his first birthday. 28th of November, 1854. So he's almost about to turn 1. Sorry, I'm going to touch my mouse. The father here is listed as James Thomas. I am sorry, my mouse has a mind of its own. And the mother is Elizabeth, but the last name is Barrington. But notice what is here in the column, 1 Bartlett's Building, Earl Street, Finsbury. Same address is up here, and this says bookbinder. And so that's what clicked me into the fact that this is Elizabeth Morris, because that's the name of William Henry Morris's mother, was Elizabeth Morris. And so this clicked me into the fact of, oops, maybe I should go and look at wedding records to see if she did get married again. And sure enough, she got married in 1854 to James Thomas Barrington, who was a bookbinder. And that is how that's why my second great-grandfather did not become a jeweler. But what was his occupation? I can't remember what his occupation was. But these two kids, half brothers, were actually baptized on the same day. So that's a really cool. So there's that's a parish record. It would not be on a government record because it was in 1855. 1855. I'm totally forgetting where I'm going with this. So there's an example of a parish record that shows where the birth is. There is no column for the birth date in that. So they've actually the minister decided to actually write in the actual birth date on there. So for us coming along generations later, we can actually find out the actual birth date of that person. So there was no birth certificate, but we have a birth record. We have a record of his birth, and that's about as close as we're probably going to get to it for that. And then we can find, and then we'll look around for other information like census reports, which would also, sorry, I had a big long hair there, which would also help support his birth date as well, because 1840, he was on the 1851 census report, and she was listed there as married, as the wife of a jeweler, is what she was listed on the 1851 census as. So Elizabeth Morris, who was married and was Elizabeth Price, was listed on there as the head of the household, and she was married to a jeweler. She was married to a wife of a jeweler, was written as her occupation. Underneath that was my second great-grandfather, William Henry Morris Price, and he was 2 years old. Or, yeah, I think he's listed as 2. So they put his birth around 1849, which is when his birth actually was. So see how you can pull this information in from sideways to help create the missing information. All right, so let's get back to where we were. Family Bibles often recorded births and marriages, but never made it into official records. And sometimes they would births, and they would also put deaths in there as well. So Family Bibles would record who had been born, who got married, who died, and so the Hatch, Match, and Dispatch, as it's sometimes called. Then you've got newspapers. You had engagement and marriage announcements in there, obituaries, and even birth announcements would appear in newspapers as well. And it would have things like Mr. and Mrs. William Price welcomed the birth of a son. That's it. You've got no idea what the mother's name is. You know what the father's name is. And sometimes on the record, they will put Mr. and Mrs. William Smith, and in parentheses put Nee Price. Sorry, Mr. and Mrs. William Price, and then in parentheses they would put Nee Morris welcomed a baby son. Now at that point you don't know the name of the son, because in those days they didn't actually put the name out there, but it was always Mr. and Mrs. and the name of the husband and then their last name. Some of them would put the Nee, or put Nee, N-E-E, for saying that what her maiden name was, but not always. Cemetery records, tombstones may list the birth and death years if no other record exists. So, for example, a missing 1880 death record might be replaced with a church burial record. Use censuses as substitute. You've got use census substitute. Sorry, totally reading my notes the wrong way. You've got tax records. If census records are missing, like the 1890 U.S. federal census, if they're missing, tax lists show who lived where and when. You've got city directories. These yearly listings were great for tracking movements. You have voter rolls and draft registrations. So if your ancestor was eligible to vote or was drafted for the military, you might find them there as well. For example, the 1819 census was lost, but the 1890 veteran census for Civil War vets survived. So if your ancestor was a Civil War vet, you may still be able to find information on them through the 1890 veteran census. If a record is missing, check the FAN club, and FAN stands for Friends, Associates, and Neighbors. Your ancestors may be mentioned in someone else's record. And I, back when I was at IGHR in 2023, one of the evening presentations, which was for all attendees, was a really cool story. And the person presenting it told how he used other people's stories. So the fans, the friends, associates, and neighbors, he used their stories to tell his ancestors' stories. He found out somebody had kept a journal. He went into the journal. Yes, his ancestors were listed in there. He then used that information to have a look through newspapers and stuff. And he was able to slowly build up the story of his ancestors' travel from how he got from point A to point B on this journey, because he started off in the state in the east and ended up on a state in the west side of the United States. And so he was able to use other people's journals and newspaper articles and things like that from the fan club in order to put the pieces together to create the story. Alternative sources, you've got land deeds, tax records, newspapers, and church archives. Land and property records, deeds and homestead records show property ownership, transfers, and sometimes even family relationships. Mortgage and lease records, if your ancestor rented land, they may still appear in land agreements. If no birth record exists for an ancestor, but their father owned the land, they may be mentioned in inheritance documents. Local histories and family history books. Many counties hang on, I just got to pull over my show and tell for this one. Many counties and towns have books written about their founders and early settlers. Your ancestors could be mentioned in there if they helped settle the town. Pioneer and settler books. Some families wrote their own genealogies that predate official records. This here is the Longland story, and this has my ancestors in it. So the Longlands married into the Eakins family, and notice I got a thing here. So when I go to that page, this is where the Eakins are mentioned. And well, actually, no, this is actually the family tree. So we actually have the family tree written here. And see, I've got written up here that this is my 4th great-grandparents, my 3rd great-grandfather listed here, so that I can, when I'm looking at this, I know exactly where I am in my tree. But it's got continuations on. So this is War Boys, George Eakins and Anne Longland, from War Boys to Woodhurst from 1784. And there's George Eakins there. This is Anne Longland, and it's even got daughter of Thomas Longland, born 1765, died 1828. One of the earnestly followed her savior, quoted from the book Patty C. Eakins. Now, I also have, I should have brought that in here. It's out there on my table because this book was sitting on top of it. But the book that's out, the book I'm referring to, it's in, my mother borrowed a copy from my great aunt who had an original copy of Patty C. Eakins' book. And my mum photocopied it and did some copies for several family members. And she got one of those books that just has the archival sleeves in it. And so she put the whole book into that for me. And at the back are the pages that she got from the guy who was restoring the manor house when they went to visit their manor house in War Boys when they went to visit there. And so this is this whole packet. And the book by Patty C. Eakins is written about her life, as she wrote it about her life in a series of letters about her life living in the manor house. So this is this whole book about somebody who lived in the manor house, but I'm also learning her life story through that as well. Totally forgot. I should have grabbed both of them instead of just this one. But this one has family trees in it, and it tells you where to go for the next one. And then down here we've got War Boys, the family of John Longland, farmer from 1794, families of the Fullard and Maxwell. So this is where other families come in, and then it tells you where to go to catch the next part of the tree. But in between all of that is written, let me show you this. Oh, actually, they have. I can show you something even better. Hang on. Un momento. But they have in here like the stories of the families and a little bit and more about them and how they live their lives and things like that. But one of the cool things that's in here, if I can quickly find it, the War Boys hunts. Oh, that's right. It's on this page. It's next page over. So this here, this is the manor house in War Boys where my ancestors used to live. And this portion here is actually the churchyard, because the church sat here, then there was a long driveway, and the manor house sat behind the church. So this is part of the churchyard where some of my ancestors are buried. My parents have visited this house and visited the graveyard. They've taken pictures of the gravestones for me. In fact, they're in that book with Patty's book as well. There's a picture of the tombstones. And so from that information, I can easily plug those into my tree to where they fit and everything else. Can't remember what the house on Burberry Road, Ramsey, is all about, but one of their the church and bishop's place. This is Buckden, the White Lion, the church, and the bishop's palace is in the background there. But I have a piece of paper in here because this piece of paper actually talks about is the history of the Lion House. And it's got different photographs and things in there. And it's the hotel, the Lion Hotel is a 15th century grade 11 listed building rescued from corporate ownership in 1982. And so it's even still in business today. And this just gives you a little bit of history about it here. So I've got that tucked in there because that's relevant. So this is a resource of information as well. And usually in some books, when they do the family stuff and they've got like all of this in here, you'll find down here they have like notes. They'll have like little numbers next to people's names, and down here will be written notes for sourcing and all of that. And this one, I believe they put it all in the back of the book. Yes. So they have the bibliography here in the back of the book, which is where they got all their information, which is where they got information from as well, what records they used and that sort of thing. So that's a pretty cool thing to have. And I also have it for another family. This is on my dad's side of the family. I also have it for another family on my mum's side of the family as well. And I'm not sure where that one is. I know I have it because I found it recently. It may be over there with the red book as well. So, and then you've also got Library of Congress and state archives. They often have digitized local history books. So a missing birth record in 1820 might be replaced with a town history mentioning the family and information on who was in the family, made list there when they were born, their ages when they came into town, and that sort of thing as well. You have newspapers and community bulletins. Many newspapers published personal announcements, legal notices, and obituaries. Wills and estate sales were often published in newspapers, especially in small towns. A missing death certificate could be replaced with a newspaper obituary. Letters, diaries, and journals. Family letters can contain first-hand account of births, marriages, and deaths. Many diaries include families' names, events, and even local gossip. So those journals, if they are donated to an archive or a historical society or something like that, may get scanned. And so people can then scan it, and that's how they can find other people's stories to tell their ancestors' stories. Check historical societies and online archives. Many families donated their old letters and journals. Well, there you go. So a missing marriage record could be verified by a letter where the mother wrote, your sister married John on Sunday, or whatever it wrote. In early America, marriage banns which were, and that's BANNS, which were announcements, were posted in church for weeks before the wedding. Some records of these still survive in church archives. And in those church parish records, you can actually, might have the bands in there, and then they will have first, second, and third, because it was usually 3 that they had to be announced, and it would have the dates next to them when each band was announced. And after the 3rd band was announced, if there was no objections, the couple were considered married. They may still go through ahead with a marriage ceremony, but that was another way of doing it as well. In some churches, the bands, once they were read, the couple was considered married after the 3rd reading of the bands. And others, even though the bands were read out, they still went ahead with the wedding ceremony in some churches. So you've got to see what the custom was at the time. Okay, so how disasters like the 1890 US Census fire changed record keeping. In 1890 and the 1890 Census fire and other records lost. In 1890, was mostly destroyed in a fire, leaving a 20-year gap in many family records. The World War II bombings in Europe wiped out church and civil records in many towns. Fires in courthouses and archives destroyed local records across the US and Canada, and even across the UK. Anywhere that's had a church fire where they have archives or records, courthouses, archives, churches, if there's been a fire in there, there could be a loss of records. How record keeping improved after disasters. Governments began creating backup copies after realizing records could be lost. More emphasis was placed on keeping multiple types of records, civil, church, land, and tax records. For example, after the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, officials reconstructed many lost birth records using newspapers and personal affidavits. Now, this 1906 San Francisco earthquake came up in my family because we had my great-grand-uncle who was the tyrant and was actually arrested twice for treason in Sydney during World War II. He was a Nazi sympathizer and had actually somehow got funds from the Nazis and embezzled the money instead of using it for whatever it was they wanted to use for. He claimed at one point that he was German. He was German, not a New Zealander, not an Australian. He was German, but they wanted him to produce his birth certificate. He used the 1906 San Francisco earthquake as a reason that he couldn't produce it because it was destroyed in the earthquake. So, but then they later disproved that that was false as well. So where to look when official records are gone? State and regional archives, many have reconstructed records after disasters. Local historical societies often contain letters, photos, and family trees donated by residents. DNA testing. If no paper record exists, DNA can connect you to relatives who have family documents. So remember, DNA shows you're blood related. genealogy shows you how, and you put the two together. And I'm like working through all my matches, right? I've got a couple of really cool matches going on right now. Mysteries in the matches. So have you ever worked around missing record? Have you ever worked around missing records in your genealogy research? Losing records doesn't mean losing family history. With creative research strategies, you can uncover missing details through alternative sources. So my challenge for you today is find one missing record for an ancestor and try to find a different strategy. Check a newspaper, check land deeds, or a church archive instead. Even probate records. I totally forgot. This one's not on my notes, but probate records can help you find people in there, because it will help you find people who are connected, like relatives and that sort of thing. Because when you look at the probates, there was a time when writing out wills and that, it cannot be witnessed by somebody who is mentioned in the will. So if you're writing a will for your family and you mention your children and they are of age where they could witness a document, they are not allowed to sign it. You may even put into the will, these are the names of my children and these are their birth dates, as further verification that they've got the right people, to help whoever's executing the will, that they've got the right people. So if somebody's named as an executor, if people are inheriting from the will, heirs to the will, none of them can sign. If they are mentioned in the will, they cannot sign it as a witness. It has to be witnessed by somebody who is not mentioned in the will. So it could be another relative, it could be a friend of the family, and then on the land records, you can put in there the people who own it or who it's going to be conveyed to and things like that. So there's a lot of different ways that you can go around and search things. Even when records disappear, the stories of our ancestors don't have to be lost forever. Through creative research and alternative sources, we can keep those histories alive. So that is your challenge. Go find a mystery in your family where you can't find the death records, the birth records, the marriage records, the census records for a particular relative, and find a different way using one of the things that we've mentioned tonight. Or you might even have something different, which is awesome. And see if you can find information for them from other sources, and let us know in the comments below how you found the information using alternative sources to the primary sources of birth, deaths, marriages, land records, because you can use land records, birth, deaths, and marriages, or even census reports. Okay, and with that, we are out of here. So go out, another one. Sorry, I just thought of another one. So another one you can do is look for, where we did this one, look for books that are about an event that happened in the area. So this is The Witches of Warboys. This took place in 1593, and this was an elderly couple who were accused by these teenage girls, these young ladies, of being witches. It turned out to be false, but they were tried and convicted, and later found out that it was completely false. And the stuff that these girls did to this elderly couple was horrendous. And this elderly couple actually lived in and owned the manor house at one point. So there was a big to-do about that. So this is in here. And of course, all of their names are mentioned. So that's another place that you can go and look for books like something like this, where there is the history about the area, where ancestors may have been mentioned because they were living in the area at the time the event took place. They may have been involved they may have been up to their ears in the event. You don't know. They could have been just on the side, but they may still be mentioned in just little books like this. And this is just a little, how many pages in this book? Well, it's not even 100 pages. So actual reading is like 77 pages. Yeah. That's a very, very quick read, but also very tiny writing as well. So it took me a little longer. I like the bigger writing. So you can even find books that are on an event that took place in your area where your ancestors lived. So don't disregard those as well, because there could be a mention of your ancestor in there, and they may mention how young that person was, or something that indicates the age of that person as well. Or they may even talk about the wedding that took place. So those are some of your resources. Go out, have fun. Let us know in the comments below how you got on, and we will catch you guys back